If you listened closely, you could almost hear the heartbeat of Blue Ridge Racetrack beneath the roar of the crowd, the clatter of hooves, and the insistent call of fate itself. The spring sun burned high above Virginia's rolling hills, warming the swaying banners and throwing long shadows across the infield. Every stallion and every gambler seemed to sense it. Today was not just another race. For Emily Carter, it was a day that might decide her entire future.
It's all right, just a little further.
Emily stood in the musty shade of stable number 14, hands buried deep in the iron-gray mane of her prized stallion Pegasus. The animal shifted his weight, letting out a heavy sigh that ruffled her sleeve. She pressed her forehead to his broad neck, feeling the old familiar mix of hope and dread tightening in her chest. The Carter stable sign above her seemed almost to mock her now, its blue paint peeling, the proud lettering faded by years of sun and wind. Out in the paddock, chaos reigned. Bookies yelled out odds from battered wooden booths, their voices lost beneath 100 clashing accents. Jockeys paced, lips pressed tight, boots tapping the ground in nervous patterns. Trainers, eyes darting, barked last-minute instructions or tugged at bridles, coaxing nervous horses into place. The scent of hay, sweat, and fresh-cut grass hung thick in the air, tinged with cigarette smoke and the metallic edge of anticipation. "Emily, he's looking good," Martha called, stepping into the stall. Her stable hand, short, broad-shouldered, with crow's feet as deep as her laugh, offered a tired but encouraging smile. "I've never seen him shine like this." Emily managed a faint grin, glancing up at the older woman. "Thanks, Martha. He'd better. If we lose today." Martha's eyes softened, and she reached out, squeezing Emily's arm. "Don't borrow trouble yet. Your father used to say, 'Let the race run before you count your chickens.'" Emily laughed. But it came out thin, brittle. He always had a saying for everything, didn't he? Martha nodded, looking away for a moment, lost in memories of the man who'd built this stable with nothing but his own hands and stubborn will. Emily swallowed hard. She could still see him, her father, leaning on the fence rail, eyes shining as he watched her ride. He'd believed in her, in the horses, in the future they could build together. And when he'd passed, the debts and the doubts had come crashing in, nearly burying her hope for good. But hope wasn't dead. It was standing right in front of her, 1 to 200 pounds of muscle and spirit. Pegasus snorted softly, his coat gleaming silver in the shafts of sunlight. The public address system crackled overhead. "Post time in 20 minutes. All entries, please make your way to the paddock." The words sent a ripple of energy through the air. Emily's hands shook as she adjusted Pegasus's bridle, her breath coming faster now. She caught sight of a familiar figure in the hallway. Frank Dolan, the track's gruff manager, clipboard in hand, already looking her way. He was never one for sympathy. If Pegasus didn't run well, if she didn't settle the stable's account, Dolan would make sure the Carters were finished at Blue Ridge for good. Martha glanced between them, her lips pressed into a line. "You want me to lead him out, Em?" Emily hesitated, her nerves jangling. "No, I need to do it myself. He knows me and—" "I think I need it too." They stepped into the sunlight together, Emily leading Pegasus out onto the crushed limestone path. A group of teenage boys pressed against the rail, eyes wide as the gray stallion passed by. "Wow, look at him! That's Pegasus, right?" one of them shouted. Emily mustered a small smile, tipping her cap. "He sure is. Fastest horse on the East Coast if he's in the mood." Another trainer scoffed from a few yards away. If he doesn't throw a shoe, maybe? Or break his stride. Emily shot the man a glare, her jaw clenched. The competition at Blue Ridge was fierce, and the stakes were personal. She had been fighting for respect and solvency ever since her father's death. Her stable was one of the last family-owned outfits left. The others were big syndicates, men with fat wallets and fatter egos. The crowd thickened near the paddock. Bettors waved wads of cash, arguing over odds, their faces red with excitement or disappointment. Emily caught snatches of conversation as she passed. He's a beauty, that Pegasus, but I hear he's skittish. 20 on Carter's gray for a miracle. I'll take Anderson's gelding all day. Emily's heart pounded. She felt the pressure of every eye on her, every whispered rumor, every memory of nights lying awake, adding up debts she couldn't pay. Pegasus flicked his ears, sensing her tension. She whispered, "We can do this, boy. For Dad. For us." Pegasus nickered, his breath warm on her cheek. For a moment, everything else faded. The noise, the fear, the stakes. There was just the quiet understanding between horse and rider. A trust built over hundreds of mornings in the pre-dawn cold, over shared failures and small victories. A horn sounded from the grandstand, drawing Emily's attention to the track. The starting gates gleamed in the distance, horses moving into position one by one. The Blue Ridge racetrack looked almost magical, its white fences, emerald turf, and beyond it, the shadowed line of woods that bordered the property. "Emily, we're up!" Martha's voice broke through her reverie. Emily took a deep breath and led Pegasus forward, her steps slow, deliberate. The sun flashed off the silver buckles, and the stands erupted in cheers as the contenders emerged, each one a symbol of hope or desperation for someone in the crowd. She walked Pegasus past the crowd, past the VIP boxes where men in suits laughed and toasted with bourbon, past the working families packed on splintered benches, waving betting slips in the air. Pegasus's muscles tensed, his nostrils flaring as they drew closer to the starting gate. Emily could feel his energy crackling beneath her fingers, a living current, wild but focused. Then, just as they reached the gate, Pegasus paused. He turned, gazing at the crowd, ears pricked, as if searching for something or someone lost in the sea of faces. Emily frowned. "What is it, boy? We're here? We're ready? Aren't we?" But Pegasus only snorted again, his gaze unwavering. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She'd seen that look before, but never here, never like this. And somewhere in her gut, a flicker of unease joined the chorus of hope and fear, setting the stage for a day neither she nor Pegasus would ever forget. Emily's fingers tightened around the lead as she guided Pegasus through the tunnel into the bustling paddock. The clamor was deafening. Announcers' voices boomed from the loudspeakers. Children pressed against the railings, and hot dog vendors shouted over the din. But beneath the surface of excitement, a strange undercurrent tugged at Emily's nerves. Something was off. Pegasus's silver coat gleamed beneath the sunlight, but he was not the picture of calm she needed him to be. His ears flicked back and forth, his eyes wide and restless. He tossed his head and pawed at the packed earth, the muscles in his shoulders bunching and releasing like coiled springs. Emily swallowed, a knot of anxiety tightening in her gut. She stroked his neck, murmuring, "Easy, boy. It's just another race. We've done this 100 times." But Pegasus jerked away from her touch, snorting, staring intently at the grandstands as if searching for someone. For a moment, Emily saw her own reflection in his dark eyes, uncertain, stretched thin by worry. Martha appeared at her side, breathless, a bucket of water in her hand. "He's never acted like this before, has he?" Emily shook her head. "Not like this. He's always a little keyed up before a big race, but—" A nearby trainer called out, "Carter, your horse giving you trouble?" Emily forced a smile. "He'll settle once he's at the gate." But Pegasus didn't settle. He circled restlessly, eyes darting to the grandstands. Somewhere in the rows of faces, a commotion started. People pointing, a child shrieking in surprise. Pegasus sidestepped, nearly knocking over a young groom who scurried out of his way, dropping a handful of sugar cubes. "Whoa, boy, steady!" Martha called, grabbing for the lead. But Pegasus jerked back, muscles bunching, sweat breaking out along his flanks. Emily's heart hammered. She tried to reach for the calming words her father used to say, about breathing slow, about trust. But her mind was full of static, memories of all the times she'd needed things to go right, and how often they hadn't. "Pegasus, please," she whispered, trying to keep her voice steady. She stroked his muzzle, but he snapped his head up, nostrils flaring. And then, without warning, Pegasus reared. His hooves struck the air, towering over Emily and Martha, casting a giant shadow that sent a ripple of panic through the crowd. "Emily, look out!" Martha shouted. But Emily was already stumbling back, losing her grip on the lead as Pegasus twisted away from her. The snap of leather echoed like a gunshot as the lead rope slipped through her hands, stinging her palms. "Pegasus!" she cried. But the stallion was gone, galloping across the paddock, his silver mane flying. He barreled toward the fence that separated the paddock from the stands. People screamed and scattered, leaping back as the horse charged forward. One man dropped his binoculars. A vendor's tray of popcorn crashed to the ground. The air was full of shouts and the pounding of hooves. For a split second, Pegasus hesitated at the fence, his chest heaving, eyes wide with something like fear or longing. Then he leaped, clearing the barrier with a grace that was almost supernatural. Children gasped. Mothers yanked their kids out of harm's way. Gamblers cursed and dove for cover. Emily watched, frozen in place, her mind racing. Martha's hand gripped her shoulder, steadying her. "We've got to get him. He could hurt someone or himself." Track security ran toward the chaos, whistles shrieking. Emily stumbled after them, her boots sliding on the trampled grass. She heard Frank Dolan's voice above the noise, barking orders. "Somebody close the gates. Get that horse under control, now!" Pegasus careened down the path between the stands and the stables, scattering a flock of pigeons. Emily sprinted after him, her breath burning in her lungs, dodging spilled drinks and discarded betting slips. The paddock, moments ago a place of tense routine, was now a scene of pure mayhem. Jockeys jumped clear of their mounts. Horses whinnied in confusion, and trainers cursed as their own carefully laid plans unraveled. Pegasus skidded to a halt, nostrils flaring, head whipping back toward the stands. He seemed to be looking for something, or someone, his entire body taut with a restless energy Emily had never seen before. Martha caught up, her face pale. "Em, what's gotten into him?" Emily shook her head, speechless. It was as if Pegasus was caught between two worlds, the world of the track and something beyond it. She thought of her father again, and how he always said horses saw things people couldn't. Maybe, just maybe, Pegasus was trying to tell her something. A voice crackled over the PA system. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. Security is handling the situation. The next race will be delayed. Emily pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. This was her nightmare. A public disaster. Her reputation hanging by a thread. The stable's future in jeopardy. Emily, a security guard barked. Stay back. We'll handle it. No, he knows me. Please, let me try, she pleaded, pushing forward. But Pegasus wouldn't let anyone close. He backed away from the security staff, eyes rolling, sweat lathering his coat. Then, as suddenly as the chaos began, he turned, nostrils flaring, and started to walk, then trot, toward the far end of the grandstands, toward a place where a small crowd had parted, forming a path. Emily followed, helpless, heart pounding as she realized she'd lost control, not just of the horse, but of everything she'd fought so hard to save. And somewhere deep down, she knew, nothing would ever be the same after this race day. Not for her, not for Pegasus. For a moment, time seemed to stretch. Pegasus's hooves striking the pavement, Emily's frantic footsteps echoing behind, the entire world narrowing to a tunnel of noise and panic. She heard people calling her name, heard Dolan shouting orders, but all of it faded beneath a single desperate question. Where was Pegasus going, and why did he seem so certain? The crowd had split, a ripple of awe and fear running through them as Pegasus slowed his frenzied gallop to a wary trot. Emily pressed forward, pushing past stunned onlookers and gawking bettors, her eyes locked on her horse's shimmering gray coat. Security guards formed a loose perimeter, radios crackling, hands raised, but none dared get too close. Pegasus tossed his head, scanning the faces, as if searching for something only he could see. Then, in the haze of confusion, a tall figure stepped out from the edge of the stands. He looked out of place in the chaos. Dark jeans, boots worn from honest work, a blue button-down rolled at the sleeves. His hair, tousled and sun-bleached, hinted at weeks spent outdoors. But it was his eyes that drew Emily up short. Kind, steady, carrying a strength that didn't demand attention, but quietly anchored everything around him. He couldn't have been older than his early 30s. He looked at Pegasus, not with fear, but with a gentle certainty that made the world seem to slow around them. Pegasus locked eyes with the man. The horse's ears pricked forward, his nostrils flared, and for a split second, Emily saw a spark of recognition. It was as if the stallion had found a missing piece of himself. Without warning, Pegasus stepped forward, head bowed, his wildness dissolving into a trembling calm. The crowd fell silent, as if all of Blue Ridge Racetrack were holding its breath. Emily's breath caught. "Who?" she whispered, but her voice was lost in the hush. The man didn't move quickly. He approached Pegasus the way a person might approach a skittish child, each step quiet, respectful. He stretched out his hand, palm open. Pegasus leaned in, nostrils twitching, and let the man's fingers brush his muzzle. "It's okay, old friend," the man murmured, his voice so low Emily could barely hear it. "It's just me." The gray stallion shuddered, blowing out a long breath. The tension that had seized his body seemed to flow away, and in that moment, Emily realized she was seeing something she'd never known. A bond deeper than training, deeper than any prize money or championship title. It was a reunion. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Someone snapped a photo, a child pointed in awe, and even the security guards hesitated. Emily took a step closer, her heart pounding. She wanted to shout, to demand an explanation, but she found herself rooted to the spot. Pegasus, her lifeline, her hope, had become someone else's in the blink of an eye. The man ran a hand down Pegasus's neck, whispering quietly, as if catching up after years apart. Then, as naturally as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world, he placed a hand on Pegasus's withers and swung up onto his back in a single fluid motion. There was no saddle, no bridle, just trust. A gasp rose from the stands. Even Dolan fell silent. Emily stared, frozen between outrage and awe. "Wait! Stop!" she finally managed, but the words sounded distant in her own ears. Pegasus pivoted, muscles rippling, waiting for a cue. The man, James Walker, though Emily didn't know his name yet, looked out at the assembled crowd. He caught Emily's gaze for a split second. In his eyes, she saw gratitude, apology, and something else, a sadness that cut straight through her. "Thank you," he said quietly, almost as if he were saying goodbye. Then he nudged Pegasus's sides, and the stallion sprang forward, not in panic, but in perfect harmony with his rider. Together, they galloped along the fence, weaving through the last pockets of startled spectators. In a final, breathless moment, James guided Pegasus through a break in the crowd, toward the tree line at the far edge of the racetrack grounds. Emily started to run, ignoring the pain in her legs and the pounding in her chest. She pushed past security, Martha shouting her name behind her, but it was no use. By the time she reached the fence, James and Pegasus were already disappearing into the woods. A flash of gray, a swirl of dust, gone. For a moment, the world was completely silent. Even the birds seemed to have stopped singing. Emily braced herself on the fence, gasping, her mind racing. The crowd behind her buzzed with speculation, rumors already spreading like wildfire. "Did you see that? Who was he? Is the horse stolen? Are they filming a movie or something?" Dolan stormed up, face red. "Emily Carter, what the hell just happened? That's your horse, your responsibility. If he's not found, you'll be banned from Blue Ridge for life." Emily tried to speak, but the words tangled in her throat. Pegasus was gone. The stable, her father's legacy, was on the brink of ruin. Everything she'd built, everything she'd fought for, was slipping away. Martha found her, arms wrapping tight around her shoulders. "We'll find him, Em. We will." But Emily could only stare into the trees, a single question echoing in her mind. Who was that man, and how did Pegasus know him? As the sun began to slide lower in the sky, the answer seemed impossibly far away, waiting somewhere in the shadows of the past. The sun slanted low over Blue Ridge Racetrack, turning the grass a dusky gold and throwing long shadows across the now quiet paddock. But inside Emily, there was nothing but noise, a whirlwind of worry, panic, and disbelief. She'd replayed the moment Pegasus disappeared at least a dozen times in her mind, trying to understand how everything had fallen apart so quickly. The stables buzzed with hushed voices, whispers ricocheting between the stalls. People looked away as she passed, some with sympathy, others with suspicion. Even the familiar smells of leather and hay felt different now, tainted by fear. Emily pushed open the door to her office, hands shaking, and slumped into her father's old chair. His photograph stared down at her from the wall, him grinning beside a much younger Emily, both beaming with pride beside a horse that wasn't Pegasus, but somehow felt just as important. A harsh knock jarred her from her thoughts. The door swung open before she could answer. Frank Dolan entered, jaw set, paperwork clutched in his hand. 2 racetrack security guards flanked him. Emily Carter, he barked, voice like gravel. You want to tell me what in God's name happened out there? Emily rose, defiant despite her racing heart. Pegasus spooked. He's never done that before. Someone in the crowd must have... Dolan cut her off. Don't start making excuses. You lost control of your entry. The whole track saw it. And now... He waved a sheaf of papers at her. I've got sponsors calling, security asking if it's theft, and the local news sniffing around for a scandal. He glared at her. You're suspended from racing activities until Pegasus is found, and if we don't get that horse back... His eyes narrowed. You and your stable are done here. Emily swallowed hard, fury and fear mixing in her throat. He's not stolen. I'll find him. I'll make this right. Dolan's sneer was cold. For your sake, you'd better. Because if you don't, you'll never race again, here or anywhere else. He spun on his heel, the security guards trailing behind him, leaving Emily standing in the hush. Her fists clenched, her mind spinning. It wasn't just about reputation. It was about everything she'd worked for, everything her father had built, everything she owed to Martha, the horses, and herself. The door creaked open again, this time softer. Martha peeked in, face drawn, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. Heard all that? Emily nodded, rubbing her forehead. We have to find Pegasus, Martha, tonight. They set to work immediately. Martha called the local police, explaining the situation in clipped, urgent tones. Emily put out word among the jockeys and trainers, offering a reward for any solid lead. Most were skeptical, some even snide, but a few offered genuine concern. One old friend promised to keep an eye out along the back roads. Within an hour, a loose search party had formed. A pair of uniformed officers, 2 young jockeys, Martha and Emily herself. Flashlights in hand, they began to comb the woods beyond the racetrack, calling Pegasus's name, looking for fresh hoofprints or broken branches. Emily's boots sank into the soft earth, each step weighted with the knowledge that every minute Pegasus was missing. Her chances of finding him safe slipped further away. They found nothing but silence and darkness. Emily's phone buzzed constantly, Dolan demanding updates, reporters leaving messages, concerned neighbors offering advice. None of it mattered. All that mattered was Pegasus. Hours slipped by. Emily circled back to the stables, desperate for a clue. That's when she noticed something odd. Pegasus's stall door stood ajar, swinging slightly on its hinges. Heart pounding, she stepped inside. The stall was empty except for the scattered straw and a faint, unfamiliar scent, like rain on old paper. Emily knelt and ran her fingers over the floorboards, searching for anything out of place. That's when she saw it. A folded slip of paper wedged beneath the water bucket. With trembling hands, she opened it. The handwriting was careful, a little shaky, as if written in haste or under stress. To find what was lost, follow the past. Emily stared at the note, mind racing. No name, no signature, just those cryptic words, curling at the edges with moisture. She scanned the stall again. Nothing else. Not even a hoofprint. A fresh wave of anxiety swept over her. Was this a ransom note? A taunt? Or a message from whoever had taken Pegasus? And why did it feel strangely familiar? She hurried to find Martha, clutching the note like a lifeline. Look at this, she said, voice low. Someone left it in Pegasus's stall. To find what was lost, follow the past. Does it mean anything to you? Martha frowned, reading the words twice. Maybe it's about where Pegasus came from? Or someone from his old life? Emily's thoughts tumbled. She remembered the man in the crowd, the way Pegasus had calmed instantly in his presence, the familiarity in his voice. It has to be him. He knew Pegasus. He must be connected to Pegasus's past, maybe even his first owner. Martha nodded. So what do we do? Emily straightened, determination hardening her voice. We go back. We trace every step of Pegasus's life before he came to us. If this is a clue, I'm not missing it. They spent the next hours poring over old records and calling contacts. Emily felt exhaustion threatening to drag her down, but she pressed on. Finally, as dawn began to creep over the horizon, she stared at the note one last time. To find what was lost, follow the past. Her father's voice echoed in her memory, about loyalty, about listening to what horses tried to say when words failed. Maybe Pegasus's past held the only hope she had left. She closed her eyes, made a silent promise, and braced herself for the next step. Whatever it cost, she would find Pegasus and uncover the truth behind the stranger in the woods. Emily barely slept. By sunrise, she was back at her father's old desk, sifting through boxes of paperwork that smelled of dust and memory. Outside, Blue Ridge Racetrack was just waking up. Jockeys yawning over black coffee, stable hands sweeping out stalls, the distant calls of morning birds. But for Emily, time had lost meaning. Only Pegasus mattered now. The cryptic note lay beside her, its message echoing in her mind. To find what was lost, follow the past. She started at the beginning. Pegasus's registration papers were tucked in a battered manila folder. She read and reread them. His date of birth, his lineage, sale dates, scribbled signatures from buyers and sellers, each name blurring into the next. It was a paper trail, but it was also the trail of a life. A horse's journey from one owner to another, from hope to heartbreak and, eventually, to her stable. She called the regional livestock registry, her voice raw from lack of sleep. After half an hour of waiting, a clerk transferred her to the city archives. There, a weary woman with a southern drawl finally agreed to pull up digital records. Birth certificates, bills of sale, shipping logs. Emily filled pages in her notebook with addresses, phone numbers, and names. That afternoon, armed with a list of leads, Emily drove into the city. The spring air was warm and heavy with the scent of rain, but she barely noticed. Her first stop was a stuffy municipal building, where a young clerk helped her sort through decades-old sales receipts and ownership forms. The records confirmed what Emily already knew. Pegasus had been born at a place called Willow Creek Ranch. Her heart skipped. The name sounded almost mythic, part of a past she could barely imagine. She jotted down the ranch's old address, just outside a forgotten town, a place that rarely made the news anymore. But as she dug deeper, Emily found something stranger. Pegasus hadn't always been called Pegasus. His foal papers listed him as Silver Promise. He'd been sold at a deep discount during a financial crisis at Willow Creek Ranch, the bill of sale signed by a desperate hand. It looked rushed, the signature barely legible. She followed the paper trail further. The next name on the list was an auction house, long since closed. The address was just a cracked slab of pavement now, choked by weeds. The windows of the old office boarded up. She stared at it from behind the wheel, frustration pounding in her chest. Why was it all so hard to piece together? Why did Pegasus's history seem full of gaps and shadows? Determined, Emily found the phone number for a man named Gerald Price, listed as a stable worker at Willow Creek Ranch, now retired. She dialed with trembling hands. On the fourth ring, an elderly voice answered, rough but alert. "This is Gerald." "Mr. Price, my name's Emily Carter. I own a horse, a gray stallion. He used to be at Willow Creek. I'm trying to find out about his past." There was a long pause. "Silver Promise, you mean? Or Pegasus, as you call him now." Emily sat up straight, hope surging. "Yes. Do you remember him?" "I do. Hard to forget a horse like that. Smart, loyal. Wasn't just a racehorse. He was a friend, especially to one boy. James. James Walker. Those two were thick as thieves." The name made Emily's pulse jump. "James Walker? Do you know what happened to him?" Gerald's sigh was heavy. "The Walkers owned Willow Creek once before hard times hit. Lost the ranch, lost everything. The boy, he loved that horse like a brother. The day the bank came for the land, James ran off. Nobody saw him or the horse for days. When he came back, Silver Promise was gone, sold off by the creditors. James never forgave us for that." Emily closed her eyes, the pieces snapping together. James, the stranger at the racetrack. The way Pegasus had recognized him. It all made sense now. "Do you know where I can find James Walker?" she asked. Gerald hesitated, then gave her an address, just outside the city, near the old Willow Creek property. "If you find him, tell him Gerald says hello. And tell him, some debts can't be paid in money." Emily thanked him and ended the call, the weight in her chest replaced by a nervous excitement. She drove to Willow Creek Ranch, passing endless fields and broken fences, memories of her own childhood mixing with images of what might have been for James and Pegasus. As she neared the old ranch, thunderclouds gathered overhead. The house was run down but not abandoned, white paint peeling from the porch, wildflowers fighting through the weeds. Emily parked and took a deep breath, her boots crunching on gravel as she approached. The front door creaked open. An elderly woman stood in the doorway, her eyes sharp, her posture wary. "I'm looking for James Walker," Emily said, voice steady. The woman hesitated, then nodded. "He's here, but he don't see many folks. Why are you looking for him?" Emily held up a photo, Pegasus in better days, proud and shining. "It's about this horse, about something lost, and maybe something found." The woman studied her, then with a sigh stepped aside. "Come in then. But mind your manners. We're not used to strangers, especially ones with questions about the past." Inside, the house smelled of old books, coffee, and horses. Framed photos lined the hallway. Children on ponies, men and women at county fairs, a young boy with his arms flung around the neck of a gray foal. Emily's heart ached. She knew now. Pegasus had been more than a horse. He'd been someone's home. And to find him, she'd have to step into a world of old wounds, long-held secrets, and the kind of love that didn't fade with time. Outside, the storm finally broke, rain lashing the windows, as if the sky itself knew that the past was about to be uncovered, and that nothing would ever be the same again. Rain battered the windshield as Emily wound her old Toyota down the country road, windshield wipers fighting a losing battle against the storm. The directions Gerald had given her were scrawled on a coffee-stained notepad in the passenger seat, already smeared by nervous fingers. Every mile took her farther from the safety of Blue Ridge and deeper into the uncertainty of the past. Her headlights swept over fence posts leaning like tired old men in the downpour, fields blanketed by fog, and ancient oaks shuddering in the wind. The GPS lost its signal 2 towns back. All Emily could do was trust the map in her head, her memory of Gerald's creaky voice, and the flicker of hope that somewhere ahead, Pegasus and answers waited. A flash of lightning split the sky. For a second, the landscape turned silver and sharp, revealing the bones of a farmhouse up on a low hill, its windows glowing weakly against the gloom. Emily's pulse quickened. She pressed the gas, only for the car to shudder, sputter, and roll to a stubborn stop in a puddle by the side of the road. "No, no, no!" Emily slapped the steering wheel, heart sinking. The engine was dead. She tried the ignition again, nothing but a feeble cough. She pulled her raincoat from the back seat, stepped into the storm, and locked the doors behind her. The rain soaked her instantly. Icy drops trickling down her neck, turning the gravel drive into a creek. Her boots squelched through the mud. The wind snatched her breath away, but she pushed on, clutching Pegasus's photo in her pocket like a talisman. It felt like a bad dream, lost in the middle of nowhere, drenched and shivering, chasing the ghost of a horse and the man who'd stolen him. But Emily gritted her teeth and kept going. This was for Pegasus. This was for her father. This was for everything she refused to lose. The front porch creaked beneath her weight. She raised a fist and knocked, thunder echoing overhead. For a moment, there was nothing but the wild thrum of the storm. Then, slowly, the door opened. A woman in her 70s peered out, gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. Emily recognized her from the photos in the hallway. James's aunt, the keeper of Willow Creek's last memories. "Who are you?" the woman demanded, voice wary. "My name's Emily Carter. I came to find James Walker. I think he has something that belongs to me. Or maybe it's the other way around." The woman's gaze lingered on the rain streaming from Emily's coat, the desperation in her eyes. She hesitated, then stepped back. "Get inside before you catch pneumonia. Wipe your feet." Emily stepped into a hallway lined with old riding ribbons, photos, and the faint, sweet smell of hay. The woman disappeared down the hall, returning with a towel and a mug of black coffee. "I'm Ruth, James's aunt. He's out at the barn. He doesn't take kindly to strangers, especially not after everything that's happened." Emily dried her face, hands trembling. "I'm sorry to intrude, Ruth. My horse, Pegasus, he ran away at the racetrack. I think James might have brought him here." Ruth's expression softened. "That horse. He was born here, you know. James loved him more than anything in the world. Losing him broke my nephew. You'd best talk to him yourself. But be gentle." Emily sipped the coffee, warmth spreading through her. She glanced at the walls, photos of a young James, grinning atop a silver foal, his arm flung around the colt's neck. Trophies and ribbons from small-town fairs, the kind her own father used to chase. Ruth watched her, measuring her with a cool but not unkind eye. James blames this place, this world, for everything he lost. He went to the track just to see Silver Promise one last time. Guess the horse recognized him, more than anyone else in years. You can't fake that kind of bond. Emily nodded, throat tight. He's a special horse. I never realized how much history he had. Outside, the storm eased into a steady drizzle. Emily pulled on her boots again and followed Ruth's directions out to the barn. Horses grazed in a paddock beyond, tails flicking at the rain, but there was no sign of Pegasus. Inside, the barn was cool and quiet, the air sweet with the scent of oats and sawdust. Emily paused beside a row of stalls, scanning for any sign of the gray stallion. She found none, but in the tack room, a wall was covered in snapshots. James as a boy with Silver Promise, riding bareback through a summer field. James brushing the foal's tangled mane, James holding a blue ribbon, grinning ear to ear. Tears prickled at Emily's eyes. She'd always thought she was Pegasus's savior, rescuing him from a life as just another number in a ledger. Now she realized she'd only been a chapter in a much longer story, a story that started here, with a boy and his best friend. She heard footsteps behind her. Ruth stood in the doorway, holding a raincoat. "You're soaked to the bone. James'll be up with the horses at sunrise. He doesn't sleep much. Neither do the horses, not when there's thunder." Emily forced a grateful smile, her exhaustion catching up with her. "Can I stay the night? Just until I talk to him? I'll sleep in the truck if I have to." Ruth nodded. "You can use the old guest room. Lock the door if you want. This isn't a place for trouble, just old ghosts and stubborn people." Emily climbed the stairs, dropping her bag beside the guest bed, unable to shake the feeling that she was trespassing. Not just in a stranger's home, but in a sacred story she'd never truly understood. She fell asleep to the sound of rain, haunted by dreams of Pegasus galloping free across moonlit fields, always just out of reach. When dawn came, she dressed quickly and crept downstairs. Through the kitchen window, she saw James in the pasture, Pegasus grazing at his side, the world washed clean by the night's storm. Her heart pounded as she stepped outside, knowing the next moments would change everything, not just for her, but for Pegasus, for James, and for the tangled legacy that tied them all together. Dawn crept over Willow Creek Ranch, casting pale light across fields heavy with dew and a barn roof still glistening from last night's storm. Emily stood on the porch, clutching her coffee, nerves coiled tight inside her. Out in the pasture, she could see James, tall and solitary, one hand on Pegasus's mane as the stallion grazed peacefully by his side. The sight twisted something inside her. She'd never seen Pegasus so calm, so utterly at ease. She forced herself down the steps and crossed the wet grass, heart pounding in her chest. Each step felt heavy with questions, accusations, and a strange, rising sympathy she didn't want to feel. James noticed her coming and gave no sign of surprise, just continued stroking Pegasus's neck, his face unreadable in the morning light. Emily cleared her throat. "James Walker?" He nodded, still not looking at her. "I figured you'd find me." She stopped a few feet away, suddenly unsure how to begin. Pegasus lifted his head and nickered softly, flicking an ear toward her, but his body language spoke volumes. He was rooted to James's side, tail swishing in easy contentment. "Why did you take him?" Emily asked quietly, struggling to keep the hurt from her voice. "You could have come to me. I would have listened." James finally turned. There was pain in his eyes, but also a quiet anger, the kind that had grown from years of loss and regret. "Would you have listened? Or would you have done what every trainer, every owner, every racetrack does? See him as an investment, a number, a way to keep the lights on?" Emily's cheeks burned. "That's not fair. I've given everything for Pegasus. He's my family. He's all I have left of my dad." James's voice softened, but his words cut deeper. "I know you care, but you didn't see him before everything was taken from us. Pegasus was born here. He was my best friend, my whole world. When my family lost this place, I lost him too. I went to the track just to see him, just to let him know I hadn't forgotten. He recognized me, Em. I hadn't seen that look in his eyes since we were both kids." Emily's anger faltered, replaced by a raw ache in her chest. She thought of all the mornings she'd spent brushing Pegasus, the hard-won trust between them. but she'd never seen him look at her the way he looked at James now. She tried to explain. I never meant to keep him from you. I didn't know. He saved me, James. After my father died, Pegasus gave me a reason to get up every morning. But lately, he seemed different, like he was searching for something. I thought it was nerves or that he missed my dad. James knelt, running his hand down Pegasus's face, voice trembling. He missed home. Horses remember, Emily, more than we realize. They remember kindness and loss. He was just a foal when the bank came. I promised I'd never leave him, and then I did. Because I had no choice. All these years, I blamed myself. Emily knelt beside him, the cold grass soaking through her jeans. I'm sorry, James. I really am. But you can't just take him. My stable, my entire life depends on him. I'm about to lose everything just like you did. James met her eyes, the old hurt plain on his face. That's the trouble with this world. It makes us choose between survival and doing right by those we love. I just wanted to give him back a piece of what he lost. They sat in silence, Pegasus nudging them both with his nose, as if trying to broker peace. The morning mist curled around them, blurring the past and present. Emily's voice was barely above a whisper. What are we supposed to do? I can't lose him, but I can't ignore what I saw yesterday, how he is with you. James exhaled, rubbing his forehead. I don't know. I never meant to cause trouble for you. I needed to know he was okay, that he remembered me. Emily reached out, letting Pegasus's breath warm her palm. He does remember, and maybe that's enough to start over. They stood, neither quite ready to let go of the moment. James's Aunt Ruth watched from the porch, a shadowy figure bearing witness to the healing that was only just beginning. James finally spoke. You should stay for breakfast. Pegasus will be here safe. You have my word. Emily nodded, surprised by the relief washing over her. For the first time since the racetrack, the fear inside her loosened its grip. She realized this wasn't just about ownership or winning or survival. It was about family, broken, scattered, but somehow, in this place, finding a way to piece itself back together. As they led Pegasus toward the barn, the sun finally broke through the clouds, lighting up the pasture. Emily looked at James, and for the first time, allowed herself to hope. Not just for her stable, but for all of them. She knew the hardest decisions still lay ahead. But for now, at Willow Creek, surrounded by memory and forgiveness, she could finally breathe. Emily stayed at Willow Creek Ranch for the next 2 days, her suitcase barely unpacked in the old guest room. The house was quiet, filled with the gentle rhythms of ranch life, the creak of floorboards at dawn, the hum of coffee brewing, the distant whinny of horses in the pasture. Outside, the world seemed to breathe a little slower, as if time itself had decided to give her a break. Each morning, she'd find James already in the pasture, moving quietly among the horses with an ease that spoke of years spent listening more than commanding. Pegasus always followed close by, grazing contentedly at his side, nickering for apples and nose scratches. Emily watched them from the kitchen window, a mug of black coffee cradled in her hands, and wondered how she could ever ask Pegasus to leave this place again. She considered her options over and over, weighing her heart against her obligations. Her stable at Blue Ridge was on the verge of collapse. Without Pegasus, she had nothing to bargain with, nothing to keep the lights on. Yet every time she saw the horse in James's care, his eyes bright, his coat shimmering with health and peace, She felt her arguments losing steam. At Willow Creek, Pegasus was more than a racehorse. He was family. James never pressured her for a decision. He was patient, understanding. One afternoon, after a silent lunch on the porch, he finally broke the ice. "You could call the sheriff," he said, not unkindly. "You could say I stole him. The law would probably be on your side. But that isn't what Pegasus needs. Or you, I think." Emily set down her sandwich, frustration bubbling up. "It's not that simple. I can't just let go. That horse is everything to me, James. He's my last shot, my father's legacy. Without him, I lose the stable, the house, everything." James nodded, looking away toward the pasture where Pegasus grazed beneath the broad sweep of sky. "I get it. I really do. But ask yourself, what does Pegasus lose if you take him back? Another round of city stables, trainers he doesn't know, racing until he breaks down." "You love him, Emily. But sometimes love means letting go of what you want." His words cut deeper than she cared to admit. That night, Emily lay awake, replaying every moment she'd shared with Pegasus. The early mornings, the muddy tracks, the way he'd nuzzle her pockets for treats when she was at her lowest. She thought of her father and the quiet pride in his eyes when he talked about doing right by their horses, no matter the cost. Unable to sleep, she crept outside to the barn. There she found Pegasus resting in a thick bed of straw, James nearby in a battered old rocking chair, reading by lantern light. The barn was peaceful. The only sounds the soft rustling of hay and the rhythmic breath of sleeping horses. "Can't sleep?" James asked, setting aside his book. Emily shook her head. "Too much in my head. I keep thinking, if this were just about me, I'd fight you for Pegasus. I'd call every lawyer in the state. But it's not just about me, or you. It's about him. What he needs." James smiled, tired but grateful. "You're a good person, Emily. Your dad would be proud." Emily sat beside Pegasus, running her hand down his neck. The horse nickered softly, half asleep. "What if there was another way?" she said suddenly. "What if we tried something different? Not fighting, not running, but partnering. You love him. You know him better than anyone. What if you came back with me? Be his co-trainer. Take care of him, at my stable. We put Pegasus first. Every decision, every race, every day, his happiness comes first. If he wants to run, he runs. If he doesn't, we let him rest. No more forcing him to be what he's not." James was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Finally, he nodded. "I'd do that. For Pegasus. For you. He deserves more than both of us fighting over him, and I could use a fresh start myself." Relief flooded Emily, mingled with a bittersweet ache. She knew this wasn't a perfect solution. She'd have to answer to the racing authorities, explain to the gossips at Blue Ridge, rebuild her reputation. But she didn't care. She was done making decisions out of fear. They spent the next day making plans. James agreed to move into the spare room at Emily's place, and together they would split training responsibilities, combining her experience on the circuit with his gentler methods. Emily made calls to the racetrack, bracing herself for the fallout. Some officials threatened sanctions, but others, especially those who'd seen Pegasus's breakdown, offered quiet encouragement. They drew up a new training schedule, one that focused on Pegasus's well-being instead of just chasing trophies. Emily learned James's tricks, how he calmed the stallion with a soft whistle, how he massaged aching muscles with liniment and patience, how he read the subtle signs of fatigue or joy in Pegasus's eyes. For the first time in months, Emily felt a glimmer of hope, not just for her stable, but for something deeper. She was building something new, something that honored her father's legacy without repeating the mistakes of the past. And she wasn't doing it alone. On their last morning at Willow Creek, Emily and James saddled Pegasus for a gentle ride across the fields. The air was fresh, the sun warm on their backs. Pegasus trotted ahead, tail high, as if sensing a new chapter beginning. At the fence line, Emily paused, looking back at the ranch house, at Ruth waving from the porch, at the fields shimmering with wildflowers. "We'll come back," she promised. "This isn't goodbye." James nodded, his voice steady. "He's finally going home, Emily." "All of us are." They rode out together, hearts lighter than they'd felt in years, ready to face whatever the future might bring, so long as Pegasus's happiness came first. Back in the city, Emily felt the difference before her boots even touched the stable floor. The familiar sights of Blue Ridge, morning mist curling over the paddocks, the clatter of buckets, the steady thrum of distant traffic, now seemed transformed, infused with the gentle hope she'd brought back from Willow Creek. Pegasus was home, but it was a new kind of home, shaped by promises Emily intended to keep. James settled in quickly. He set up his things in the tiny apartment above the tack room, unfazed by the squeaky floors and chipped paint. Emily half expected him to be restless or out of place, but he moved through the stable with a quiet confidence, winning over even the most skeptical grooms with his patient ways. Martha, ever loyal, watched him with a mixture of curiosity and respect. "He's good for you, Em," she whispered one afternoon, nodding toward James as he worked Pegasus through slow groundwork in the paddock. "And he's good for that horse." Pegasus thrived. Gone was the anxious, unsettled stallion who had once stared out at the crowds in distress. Now he greeted Emily and James each morning with soft wickers, his eyes bright and clear. The old training routines gave way to something gentler. Trail rides in the early dawn, playful races along the fence line, afternoons spent dozing in the sun. It wasn't long before the change in Pegasus became the talk of the track. Jockeys paused to watch him work. Trainers murmured among themselves, and even Frank Dolan couldn't hide his surprise. "Never seen him look this sound," he grunted, scribbling notes on his clipboard. "You doing something different, Carter?" Emily grinned. "We're just listening to him more." The new approach didn't go unnoticed. Within weeks, Pegasus was invited to perform at a local exhibition, not as a competitor but as a star attraction, an ambassador for a new philosophy in horsemanship. The event was packed. People crowded the rail to see the famous gray stallion, the horse who'd once vanished mid-race and come back stronger, calmer, more alive than ever. James took the reins for the exhibition, guiding Pegasus through a series of exercises that highlighted trust and communication over speed or power. At his side, Emily narrated for the crowd, sharing Pegasus's story, the hardship, the heartbreak, the reunion. She spoke about listening to horses, about second chances, about what it meant to truly care for an animal beyond trophies and money. The audience was captivated. Children pressed against the fence, eyes wide as Pegasus bowed at James's signal or followed Emily at liberty, his movements graceful and free. Afterward, local reporters swarmed them, snapping photos and scribbling notes. That evening, Pegasus's story ran in the city's biggest newspaper. From racehorse to healer, Pegasus's journey inspires city. The article told of the partnership between Emily and James, their commitment to compassion, and their horse-first approach that was winning hearts far beyond Blue Ridge. Sponsors began to take notice. A regional feed company offered a small endorsement, enough to help pay the stable's overdue bills. Donations trickled in from horse lovers moved by Pegasus's journey. Even Dolan, ever the pragmatist, began hinting that the stable could host clinics or riding camps, drawing new visitors and steady income. But for Emily, the real reward was watching Pegasus. He was the beating heart of the stable, a symbol of hope and resilience. Martha put it best one night as they cleaned tack together. "That horse has changed this place. He's changed all of us. We're a family now, an odd one maybe, but a family." James and Emily's partnership deepened into real friendship. They learned from each other every day. James taught Emily about gentle training, and she taught him how to navigate the politics of the racetrack. Sometimes, after long days, they'd sit on the porch, sharing coffee or silent sunsets, grateful for the unexpected path that had brought them together. As Pegasus's fame grew, so did the questions about his future. Would he return to racing? Would he be sold to the highest bidder? But Emily and James stood firm. Pegasus's happiness would always come first. They turned down big money offers, refusing to treat him as a commodity ever again. The local news wanted another story, a TV segment. Emily agreed, but only if they focused on the bigger picture: compassion, second chances, and the dignity of animals. The segment aired on a Sunday night, showing footage of Pegasus running free, of children visiting the stable to learn about horses, of James and Emily laughing over a fence. The next morning, letters poured in. Thank yous from parents, riders, even people who'd never seen a horse in real life. A girl in a wheelchair wrote, "Pegasus makes me believe in miracles." A retired jockey sent a check with a note, "For the next rescue." Financial worries faded, replaced by a sense of community Emily hadn't felt in years. The stable, once on the edge of ruin, was now a place people wanted to visit, a place of healing. Not just for horses, but for anyone who needed a second chance. One afternoon, as Emily watched Pegasus grazing under the wide blue sky, James joined her, hands in his pockets. "You ever think we'd end up here?" he asked, smiling. Emily shook her head, tears pricking her eyes, not of sadness, but of gratitude. "Never, but I wouldn't trade it for anything." As Pegasus lifted his head, wind ruffling his silver mane, Emily realized that victory could look 1,000 different ways. Sometimes, it wasn't about crossing the finish line first. It was about learning to listen, to heal, and to hope again. The late spring sun bathed Blue Ridge Racetrack in a golden haze, casting long, gentle shadows across the infield. But today was not a race day, at least not in the way the crowds remembered. Instead, the grandstands were filled with families, children waving homemade banners, volunteers in matching shirts moving between rows with lemonade and cookies. Laughter and music drifted on the breeze, mingling with the scent of fresh-cut grass and the soft, contented snorts of horses at rest. At the heart of it all was Pegasus. The gray stallion stood proudly at the front of a small herd, his coat gleaming, his eyes bright and alive. Emily watched from the stable door, heart swelling with something more than pride, something closer to awe. Around her, life pulsed with a warmth she hadn't felt since her father's last race, since before loss and worry had threatened to swallow her whole. Today was the first ever Blue Ridge charity ride, an event dreamed up by Emily and James after so many nights of planning at the old kitchen table. No betting slips, no roaring crowds, no anxious glances at the clock. Instead, the day was about something bigger: raising money for rescued horses, bringing the community together, and celebrating the stories that didn't fit in the narrow columns of the record books. Martha, bustling with the energy of someone half her age, managed the volunteers and kept the children from wandering too close to the horses' hooves. She paused only to wipe her brow and hug Emily, her eyes shining. "Look at this, Em. Just look at what you've built." Emily squeezed her hand. "What we've built. I couldn't have done any of it without you, Martha. Or James, or Pegasus." James joined them at the edge of the paddock, boots dusty, shirt sleeves rolled to the elbows. He nodded at Emily, a smile spreading across his face, one of quiet satisfaction, of finally coming home. "Ready?" he asked. Emily nodded, nerves fluttering in her stomach, though not the kind she'd known on race days. This was excitement, anticipation for something that mattered. The charity ride began with a simple ceremony. Emily took the mic, her voice steady but full of feeling. "Thank you all for coming. Today isn't about winning or losing. It's about second chances. For horses, for people, for families, chosen or found. When we take care of each other, we all win." Pegasus led the parade, his gait measured and calm, the children following on ponies, local riders on their own horses, even a group of veterans from a nearby therapy program. James rode beside Pegasus, and Emily walked at his other side, hand on the stallion's shoulder, feeling the energy and connection flowing through all of them. As they circled the track, not at a gallop, but at a gentle, dignified walk, Emily saw her community anew. People cheered and waved, but the cheers were softer now, full of joy instead of hungry ambition. She saw old rivals smiling, parents hugging their kids, even Frank Dolan in the stands, clapping with a rare look of approval. The ride ended with a picnic under the old oak tree, where tables groaned under the weight of homemade food. Stories were traded, some funny, some bittersweet, about horses who'd changed lives, about the unlikely twists of fate that brought strangers together. James shared how he'd lost everything once, and how Pegasus had helped him find his way back, not just to a horse, but to hope and to family. Later, Emily found a quiet moment beneath the oak, watching as Pegasus dozed in the grass, James and Martha chatting nearby. She let herself remember her father, his booming laugh, his stubborn belief that love and hard work could fix anything. She wondered what he would think of this new legacy. Not a string of trophies, but a circle of people and animals bound by compassion. She pulled a battered photograph from her pocket, the one of her and her father years ago, standing with a horse that had been her world back then. She traced her finger along the edges, smiling through tears. "You were right, Dad," she murmured. "It was never about the finish line. It was about the journey, about loving hard and letting go and starting over. No matter how many times you fall." James joined her, settling in the grass. "You thinking about him?" he asked gently. Emily nodded. "Always. But it's different now. I'm not just missing him. I'm carrying him with me. We all are." James looked out at the happy chaos around them. "You made something beautiful here, Emily. Something worth more than all the prize money in the world." She looked at him, gratitude shining in her eyes. "So did you. So did Pegasus. I think this is what family's supposed to feel like." Martha plopped down beside them, sandwich in hand. "Family's what you make it. And this is the best bunch of misfits I've ever had." They laughed, a deep, honest sound that echoed across the field. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting everything in a soft golden light, Emily stood and called Pegasus over. The stallion lifted his head, ears flicking, and ambled across the grass, pressing his muzzle into her shoulder. She hugged him tightly, whispering promises only the two of them would ever know. The last families gathered their things, the children still talking excitedly about the horses. Volunteers packed up the tables, and Pegasus nibbled contentedly at James's pockets, searching for treats. In that moment, Emily felt the past and the future coming together. A legacy not just of races run and lost, but of kindness, courage, and hope. As the sky turned pink and lavender, Emily stepped onto the empty track one last time, feeling the cool dirt beneath her boots. She looked out at the stables, the people, and the horse who had saved them all, and she smiled. Because in the end, the real victory wasn't crossing the finish line first. It was loving enough to let go, trusting enough to begin again, and daring enough to build a family out of second chances. And if you liked this story, don't forget to follow and join us for more tales of hope and healing, where the real winners are those who never give up on love.